We are reading about the little mind. But this little mind and its powers are controlled by a greater power. So now as I start to read the whole passage, it tells us that a dwarf, three-bodied trinity was her serf. The serf, the servant or slave of that greater mind power. Three-bodied trinity, three things that go together. Today we'll read about the first of those powers. First, smallest of the three, but strong of limb, a low brow with a square and heavy jowl, a pygmy thought needing to live in bounds, forever stooped to hammer fact and form, absorbed and cabined in external sight, it takes its stand on nature's solid base. A technician admirable, a thinker crude, a riveter of life to habit's grooves, obedient to gross matter's tyranny, a prisoner of the molds in which it works. It binds itself by what itself creates. A slave of a fixed mass of absolute rules. It sees as law the habits of the world. It sees as truth the habits of the mind. In its realm of concrete images and events, turning in a worn circle of ideas and ever repeating old familiar acts, it lives content with the common and the known. It loves the old ground that was its dwelling place, abhorring change as an audacious sin, distrustful of each new discovery. Only it advances step by careful step and fears as if a deadly abyss the unknown. A prudent treasurer of its ignorance, it shrinks from adventure, blinks at glorious hope, preferring a safe foothold upon things to the dangerous joy of wideness and of height. The world's slow impressions on its laboring mind, tardy imprints, almost indelible, increase their value by their poverty. The old, sure memories are its capital stock. Only what sense can grasp seems absolute. external fact, it figures as sole truth. Wisdom identifies with the earthward look, and things long known and actions always done are to its clinging hold a balustrade of safety on the perilous stair of time. Heaven's trust to it are the established ancient ways, immutable laws man has no right to change, a sacred legacy from the great dead past, or the one road that God has made for life. A firm shape of nature never to be changed, part of the huge routine of the universe. A smile from the preserver of the worlds, sent down of old this guardian mind to earth, that all might stand in their fixed, changeless type, and from their secular posture never move. One sees it circling, faithful to its task, tireless in an assigned tradition's round. In decayed and crumbling offices of time, it keeps close guard in front of custom's wall. Or in an ancient night's dim environs, it dozes on a little courtyard stones and barks at every unfamiliar light as at a foe who would break up its home. A watchdog of the spirit's sense-railed house against intruders from the invisible. Nourished on scraps of life and matter's bones in its kennel of objective certitude. And yet, behind it stands a cosmic might, a measured greatness keeps its vaster plan, a fathomless sameness rhythms the tread of life. The stars' changeless orbits furrow inert space. A million species follow one mute law. A huge inertness is the world's defense. Even in change is treasured changelessness. Into inertia, revolution sinks. In a new dress, the old resumes its role. The energy acts. The stable is its seal. On Shiva's breast is stayed the enormous dance. So I'm going back to the break on page 245. The power, the mind power, which we read about last week, has these three servants, small servants, a dwarf, three-bodied trinity. There are three of them, they work together, they go together. But they are small beings. They are the servants of that mind power, the first mind power, which he will speak to us about. First, smallest of the three, but strong of limb, a low brow with a square and heavy jowl, a pygmy thought, needing to live in bounds, forever stooped to hammer fact and form. This is the first one. He's the first, the smallest of the three, but he's strong. He has a low brow. This is supposed to be a high brow, is a sign of great intellect and intelligence. A low brow. He has a low brow with a square and heavy jowl. This is if you have a very heavy jawbone. That's his the physical appearance. In Huta's paintings of the meditations on Savitri, she has made very amusing pictures of these three beings, particularly this first one, very small, tough, strong fellow. And when she was preparing the paintings, she told Huta, I have to struggle with this fellow every day. He represents the physical mind. He's a pygmy thought. Again, this is like dwarf, a small being. And he's a thinker in a way, it's a kind of thought, but he needs to live in bounds, in a limited way. And what we see him doing, he's forever stooping or bending over to hammer fact and form, hammering away at them as a workman making tools. This thought is absorbed, he's deeply concentrated in his work, and cabined, again limited, in external sight. He's turned towards outer things, fact and form, not inner feelings and emotions. This thought takes its stand, it stands firmly, bases itself on the solid base of nature, the material world. The poet says that this being, this thought, is an admirable technician. He's really good and clever at doing things with his hands, but when it comes to thinking, his thinking is crude. It's not subtle and highly developed. The poet says he's a riveter of life to habits, grooves. It's one of the things that technicians do, is they rivet things together, parts together. They have to fasten them, that they hold together very strongly with metal rivets. So what he does, he rivets life, the life of this kind of consciousness, to the grooves of habit. What is happening over and over again will leave a track. If here in the rainy season, if somebody goes with their bullock cart across the muddy road, it will leave grooves. And then when the sun comes and dries everything up, it's very difficult to ride a bicycle or anything on those roads because the grooves are so fixed. So this mind is like that. He's fixing things firmly. He is obedient to the tyranny, the absolute rule of gross matter, not subtle matter, not physical matter, not consciousness, to gross matter, this gross matter. And it's a prisoner. It has to work with those molds, but it is not able to escape from the limitations within which it works. It binds itself. It's as if it's tying itself up in knots by the creations that it makes, these fixed formations. It's a slave of a fixed mass of absolute rules. Certain things have been laid down and told this is the way this has to be done. That consciousness is not able to branch out and make other decisions. It has to stick fast to what it has been taught or told. It sees as law the habits of the world. It understands all the habitual things that happen in the world as fixed law, which cannot be disobeyed or changed. And it sees the habits of the mind, its own mind, as truth. That's the way it's used to thinking. That's the way things have to be. It can't be different. We meet people like this. This is the conservative mind, which isn't ready to change or accept new ideas. But here Sri Aurobindo is going to tell us what an important role this mind has to play. In its realm of concrete images and events, things that are absolutely clear and can be felt and seen and understood, this consciousness is always turning in a worn circle of ideas. Like a poor animal tied to a post, it just will go round and round and round. We will see that worn circle. In a worn circle of ideas. It's forever repeating familiar acts. And it lives content. It's happy like that. Content with the common and the known. It doesn't need new and exciting and inventive ideas. It loves the old ground that was its dwelling place. If it had to move, it would always be longing for that original home that it has come from. It abhors change. to abhor, it's to feel revulsion, disgust. Nothing should change. It abhors change as an audacious sin, as something very dangerous and daring. It's distrustful of each new discovery. So if it does have to advance, of course, it does have to advance. Nothing can really stay completely fixed in this earth life. But if this thought, if this mind has to advance, it does it very, very carefully, step by careful step. And it fears the unknown as if that's a deep, dark pit which it's going to fall into and get lost. Whatever is unknown, it has to hold on to the familiar and the known. So it treasures its own ignorance. Whatever it's established by its own power of ignorance, it holds on to that very carefully, a prudent treasure of its ignorance. Somebody who has to look after money may be very prudent in treasuring what he has got, very careful. So this mind is like that. It shrinks from adventure. Oh, something very dangerous. It blinks at glorious hope. If some great light for the future comes, it's like an owl. It blinks, it can't bear to see that bright light. It prefers a safe foothold upon things. To be able to hold tightly onto familiar things, to the dangerous joy of wideness and of height. There are some people who love adventure and who will climb precipitous rock faces, and you think, how can they hold on there? They don't seem to have any safe footholds. They will fall for sure. No? But there are people who love to live like that, with wideness and with height, climbing the great mountains. But not this fellow, not this mind. It prefers the world's slow impressions on its laboring mind. It's not easy to get a new idea into that mind. That only slowly some new idea might impress itself on that consciousness and get accepted. And once it's been accepted, then the mark that it leaves is almost indelible. Once it's got hold of an idea, you can't get that idea out of its mind again. It's almost indelible. So those tardy imprints, they become more and more valuable to that mind the poorer they are by their poverty. The old, sure memories that are carried over from the past, that is its capital stock. This is what it will hold on to and not wish to part with. And these old, sure memories and the sense impressions, only what sense can grasp seems absolute, that seems to have some validity, what I see, what I hear, what I feel. So to this mind, external fact figures as the only truth. What is obvious and clear, and what we can test with our senses. It identifies wisdom, the idea of wisdom. It thinks it is bound to the earthward looking down at the soil on which we tread, where the sure footholds are. Also things long known, the actions that have been always done. It's always done like that. Why should we change it? To its clinging hold, they're like a balustrade. A balustrade is something that you hold onto to help you to go up and down stairs. Something to cling onto to prevent you falling off the edge. A balustrade of safety on the perilous stair of time, as if each moment of time is a step in a stair, and we don't know where that stair is leading us. What we can hold on to are the old things, the things long known, the actions always done. We can hold on to those as a balustrade of safety. So why is this mind like that? Because this is the task that has been entrusted to it by heaven. Heaven's trust to this mind are the established ancient ways, the things that are supposed to stay the same, that have been established and are supposed to remain the same. Immutable, unchangeable laws that human beings have no right to change. These things are a sacred legacy, something that's been left to us from the past, bequeathed to us, a special treasure, sacred treasure. Or they indicate the one road that God has made for life. This is the right path. Any other path is a deviation. You're bound to get lost. A firm shape of nature, never to be changed. Part of the huge routine of the universe. Here's the universe going round and round and round, and there are some things that are never to be changed, that are part of this huge routine, shouldn't be interfered with. And then the poet tells us that a smile from the preserver of the worlds, a benevolent smile from Lord Vishnu, has sent this power into the world, has sent down long ago this guardian mind to the earth with the intention that all the beings, the earth beings, should be able to remain in their fixed, changeless type. And they shall never move. They are not supposed to move from their secular posture. The posture, the position, the poise that they have held for centuries. Here the word secular means for many, many centuries. So one sees it, the poet says, one sees this mind circling, going round and round, faithful to its task, tireless, it never gives up in the round of this tradition that has been assigned to it, given to it as a heavenly task. And then he gives some beautiful images of this, amusing images of this conservative mind. It sits in decaying and crumbling offices of time. We can imagine some of these old offices that have been like that for 100 years at least. The desks haven't been changed, or maybe not even dusted. No, because that's the way they are, decayed and crumbling offices of time. This mind keeps close guard in front of custom's wall. I have to guard, I have to protect the way things are always done. It must not change. Or it's like an old dog dozing on the stones of a little courtyard, but ready to wake up and bark at every unfamiliar light, as at a foe that's going to destroy its home. No? A watchdog of the spirit's sense-railed house. Sri Aurobindo's used this image elsewhere of our senses, our sense of touch and taste and hearing and sight, as being like rails protecting us, protecting the spirit. So the spirit's sense-railed house, we have rails which give us some kind of protection against intruders from the invisible. So that watchdog is nourished on little scraps of life. He doesn't get much to eat, not very nice food. Matters bones. All the good meat has been eaten off already when they throw the bones to him. There he lives in his kennel, his special dog house of objective certitude. When we look at the objective life, the way that we see it and understand it through our senses, and we are sure that it's like that because we've seen it with our own eyes and touched and heard it and touched it with our own hands. No? So we might think that this is something very limited and dull and limited. And yet, behind it stands a cosmic might, a universal power. A measured greatness keeps its vaster plan. We don't understand and see that vaster plan, but it is established there, so that in the universe, a fathomless sameness, a sameness so deep that we can't see where the bottom is, a fathomless sameness rhythms the tread of life. Things go round and round in the same pace over and over again, like the stars, changeless orbits. They go round and round. And it's as if they're furrowing, making grooves in this inert space, in this unmoving, unchanging space. And one sign of this is that 1 million species, there are so many kinds of living things in the universe. Even here on Earth, so many millions. More. 1 million species, they're all following one silent law. It has to be like this. This inertness, this unchangingness, this sameness is the world's defense. It keeps the world safe. Even in change, sometimes we want things or we need things to change, but even in change, we treasure some changelessness, some values, some strengths that never change. They are precious, no? So, for example, every now and then human beings think they have to make a revolution, but it doesn't last long. It sinks back into inertia, unchanging, changeless, sameness. And even if there is a new appearance, a new dress, it's just the old wearing a new dress. The old ways resume their rule. And this is because energy, the Supreme Mother, acts, but she needs a basis of stability, of something that doesn't move. The stable is its seal. The stable allows the changefulness to exist. And the image of that is of Kali dancing on Shiva's breast. Shiva lies there, inert, unmoving, supporting that divine dance, the enormous dance. Page 245, line 256. The mind power is described as a candidate for a higher suzerainty. And people were unfamiliar with this unusual word, suzerainty. It is an unfamiliar word. It's not really an English word at all. It is an old French word which has the same significance as the English word sovereignty, which means the position or the capacity to rule, to be a ruler. In passing, I want to mention that Sri Aurobindo has introduced quite a number of French words into the English language by using them in Savitri. And we know from what he himself has said and what the mother has said is that he felt a very great affinity to the French language and culture. And Mother has mentioned that, according to her, Sri Aurobindo understood every subtlety, every nuance of the French language. And he's taken advantage of this understanding to enrich the vocabulary of Savitri with a number of French words. And this is one of them. Suzerainty. That's on page 245, line 256. We were reading about the first of the three dwarf trinity, this physical mind. And there we read on page 246, lines 288 to 89, 2 lines where we were told that for that consciousness, that being, tardy imprints, almost indelible, increase their value by their poverty. And somebody has asked, what could that possibly mean? As I understand it, it is speaking about the way that outer impressions make an imprint, make an impression on that consciousness that forever stoops to hammer fact and form. And because those imprints or impressions come to that consciousness slowly, rarely, they are valued much more than if they would be just swift impressions and lasted longer. That's how I understand these two lines. Lines 329 to 30. The poet tells us that the energy acts, the stable is its seal. On Shiva's breast is stayed the enormous dance. This is a very interesting image from Indian iconography that appears several times in the poem. Here he's speaking about the way that the energy, the cosmic energy, is visioned as a kind of dance, the dance of Kali, the dance of time. But Kali needs a dancing floor. She needs a very stable base on which she can do her energetic dance. And Lord Shiva prevents her this stable base by inviting her to dance on his breast. And in one place in the poem, Sri Aurobindo tells us how the Lord is so delighted to feel the touch of the mother's feet on her breast, on his breast, as she dances.
A dwarf, three-bodied Trinity was her serf. First, smallest of the three, but strong of limb, a low brow with a square and heavy jowl, a pygmy thought needing to live in bounds, for ever stooped to hammer fact and form. Absorbed and cabined in external sight, it takes its stand on nature's solid base. A technician admirable, a thinker crude, a riveter of life to habit's grooves, obedient to gross matter's tyranny, a prisoner of the moulds in which it works. It binds itself by what itself creates. A slave of a fixed mass of absolute rules, it sees as law the habits of the world. It sees as truth the habits of the mind. In its realm of concrete images and events, turning in a worn circle of ideas and ever repeating old familiar acts, it lives content with the common and the known. It loves the old ground that was its dwelling place. Abhorring change as an audacious sin, distrustful of each new discovery. Only it advances step by careful step, and fears as if a deadly abyss the unknown. A prudent treasurer of its ignorance, it shrinks from adventure, blinks at glorious hope, preferring a safe foothold upon things to the dangerous joy of wideness and of height. The world's slow impressions on its labouring mind, tardy imprints almost indelible, increase their value by their poverty. The old sure memories are its capital stock. Only what sense can grasp seems absolute. External fact it figures as sole truth. Wisdom identifies with the earthward look, and things long known and actions always done are to its clinging hold a balustrade of safety on the perilous stair of time. Heaven's trust to it are the established ancient ways, immutable laws man has no right to change. A sacred legacy from the great dead past, or the one road that God has made for life, a firm shape of nature never to be changed, part of the huge routine of the universe. A smile from the preserver of the worlds, sent down of old this guardian mind to earth, that all might stand in their fixed changeless type, and from their secular posture never move. One sees it circling, faithful to its task, tireless in an assigned tradition's round. In decayed and crumbling offices of time, it keeps close guard in front of custom's wall. Or in an ancient night's dim environs, it dozes on a little courtyard's stones, and barks at every unfamiliar light as at a foe who would break up its home. A watchdog of the spirit's sense-railed house, against intruders from the invisible, nourished on scraps of life and matter's bones, in its kennel of objective certitude. And yet behind it stands a cosmic might. A measured greatness keeps its vaster plan. A fathomless sameness rhythms the tread of life. The stars' changeless orbits furrow inert space. 1,000,000 species follow one mute law. A huge inertness is the world's defense. Even in change is treasured changelessness. Into inertia revolution sinks. In a new dress the old resumes its role. The energy acts, the stable is its seal. On Shiva's breast is stayed the enormous dance.